Being an auteur game designer must be tough, because on the one hand, you're constantly arguing with your publishers about demographics and whatnot, and on the other hand, people are drawing salacious pictures of your female characters, and that may be another negative to some. Nier Automata is a collaboration effort between Square Enix, Yoko Taro, and Platinum Games, and oddly enough, nothing bad happens during the game development. Square doesn't come down on Taro for the outright odd shit that just goes down in his game. The Platinum teams were able to work well with Taro, and Platinum produced a good game.
I don't know if I'm or laying an egg.
Look, I know it's hard for you youngins to understand, but back in the day, 5 years ago, Platinum was a beast at making top-tier games. Vanquish, Bayonetta, Wonderful 101, Metal Gear Rising, the list goes on. Unfortunately, that's the exact moment the inbreeding started and the devs began shilling their reputation to produce mediocre licensed games. Some of them were just okay clones of their more successful predecessors, while others were legally required to wear helmets in public. But hark! There is hope over the horizon, as Platinum has teamed up with one of the industry's most influential auteurs to produce a dream project that would set the bar for adventure games for the generation. Unfortunately, Microsoft pulled the plug on that particular venture before you could even consider it murder, so it was up to Square's living anime character to literally save the studio from not being a studio by churning out a sequel that has little to do with the series title character Nier. Wait a minute, Nier? That doesn't sound right. Let's just go fix that. There we go. Dickface Automata is the 5th installment to the Drekengard series, and is an open-world action game similar to the first Dickface game, except with more verticality and the saturation turned down just a bit. But hey, if you want that authentic Dickface experience, go ahead and turn that saturation back up. You know, if you can find the setting. This game had a lot of potential to live up to, and thankfully it's an overall satisfying experience. The world is vast and full of life. The combat, although derivative, is actually pretty solid, and the presentation and art style is engaging. And if you know me, you know I'm a sucker for a game's presentation and art style. When looking at an open world game, I ask myself, what am I going to be interacting with? And the answer is either the environment or other characters. Dickface Automata leans more towards the latter. Even though there are things to engage with within the world, they are very scarce and have very little to no depth. The interactions with the various NPCs from the many locales are the true highlight of this game. All of the story and side missions have 2B and 9S talk to the many factions of androids and machines nested within the fallen ruins of Tokyo? The series has a weird obsession with fucking with Tokyo. A lot of these characters have charming or at the very least interesting personalities to see unfold. But what truly stands out is the result after you complete the mission. A good example of this is where you are tasked with finding 16D Superior 11B. You know, one of our wingmen who totally ate shit in the prologue. We go back to the very beginning of the game and find her corpse. Reading through her logs, we find out that she was planning to go AWOL. You go back to 16D and tell her that you found 11B's remains and are given the option to either reveal 11B's plans to go rogue, or you say nothing and let 16D continue to think that her superior was strong, dependable, and loyal. Tell her the truth and she'll burst out laughing and reveal that 11B was a massive cunt who looked down on her other androids and she deserved what came to her. Or how about this Resistance member who wanted to figure out who murdered her best friend, and after doing some thorough research we discovered that it was in fact she who committed the murder, and she wiped her memory because she couldn't handle the trauma of actually killing her loved ones. And then she proceeds to lose her goddamn mind. A lot of missions are like that. Sometimes you are given the option to spare people's feelings from the truth, or not hand over collected goods out of sheer suspicion, but if you go down this route, you better get used to a whole bunch of red dots scattered across the map like the face of the world's most hated man, or stressed out teenager. Also, these missions are the best way to accumulate experience points, so I guess I'm gonna ruin this person's life. What's interesting about this world is that it is entirely populated by robots. You don't interact with a single organic life form, but rather automatons with human personalities. Even the alien machines act more human. The androids seem to exhibit common traits of humans with a bit of awareness that they are expendable, while the machines have more abstract imaginations of human emotions, which leads to more surrealism and sometimes outright hilarious moments. Of course, all of these side missions are just glorified fetch quests and escort missions, but the moment-to-moment gameplay keep everything fresh and interesting with fun combat and entertaining dialogue.
Hey, our leader told me all about you. Name's Jackass. Nice to meet ya.
My secondary concern was the game's combat, because it looked like a straight copy-paste of both Bayonetta and Metal Gear Rising Revengeance mixed together. And I can tell you folks, after sitting down and actually playing around with these systems, I'm very relieved to discover that I was completely justified in my assumptions. This combat is Revengeance, right down to the vertical sword swings and the flashing glowing red eyes that the enemies do to signify that you need to start countering shit. It is a bit heavier, and there is no focus on fast attacks or parries, but make no mistake, it's basically the same thing. However, instead of an intuitive parry system, there's a free-flowing dodge system that punishes enemies' attacks, just like another Platinum game with the exact same features. And there are subtle differences in the combat that help it stand out from it being a clone of an older mechanic. You'll be playing as one of 3 characters, the first one being 2B, a combat android with the aforementioned Revengeance-style hack-and-slash abilities. She's the standard character and well-rounded. Everyone can basically do the same thing that she does. And then you get to play as 9S, who is mechanically the best character in this entire game. Physically, he can only do heavy attacks, and they balance this out by giving him the ability to hack, which allows him to go inside a machine's OS and destroy their core in a shoot-'em-up bullet hell minigame, which will destroy or cause them damage, and when they blow up, they cause area effect damage to nearby enemies. He also has his own unique set of chests and side missions that he can unlock throughout the world. And the hacking minigame is by far the best damn part about this game, because it actually feels like you're going into cyberspace and actually doing something substantial to toe the combat into your favor. And the shoot-'em-up mechanics are just straight up fun. It's not too challenging, although some cores are a bit bullshit, but they get a lot of mileage out of it because it's everywhere after a certain point. It's like halfway through development they realized, hey, these shoot-'em-up mechanics are actually pretty fun, let's base the entire climax around this. And then there's A2, who's basically exactly the same as 2B, except that she can taunt and she has Devil Trigger. Taunting increases the damage output and lowers the defense of enemies. A pretty handy thing to use, although I kind of wish it was weaved into combat a little bit smoother. She also has a longer dash, which is alright, I guess. I never got any use out of it, so there you go. Then there's Berserker mode, which is akin to a Devil Trigger from Devil May Cry, or Ripper mode from Platinum's Metal Gear Rising Revengeance. Except in those games, the mechanic is reliable. See, an idea like this is meant to get you out of sticky situations when all of your options are exhausted. Berserker mode creates a sticky situation. It lowers your defense but raises your attack output, but at the cost of your health gradually draining. And it drains fast. And when you reach 1% health, you're completely vulnerable until you heal yourself. Wow game, thank you for showing me exactly how worthless this move is. The thing about this is that Platinum has made this mechanic before and it worked. Several times I might add. Why is it this version that's complete utter garbage? Taro, is that you? Is this your doing? You fucking monster. And the worst thing about this is that they give you the worst possible boss as a tutorial, who has a pretty airtight defense and is highly aggressive in an attack mode. This isn't exactly the best controlled environment to test all this out. It's also tied to the black box detonation, meaning it doesn't have the added benefit of being instantaneous. It's not like I'm complaining too much, I mean combat is super easy. So the addition of Berserker mode just really perplexes me. In order for Berserker mode to be a viable strategy, you have to pre-activate it before battle, always have your eye on your health gauge, and constantly be quick healing on top of doing everything else in combat. Or, you know, just fight dudes like regular, you fucking moron.
Thank you, Dark Souls.
I know it sounds like I'm making a whole lot of seemingly unfair comparisons with the combat, but that's only because it ultimately doesn't matter. Fighting is not the main focus of the game. It's only a small component in the overall experience, which is mainly comprised of traversal and interactions with small instances of fighting here and there. The combat is what it needs to be: quick, sparse, and distracting.
I don't know what this is, but it's kind of hot.
Dickface Automata has an amazing sense of stylization reflected in its use of color theory and theming. The world feels dead, despite it being very active, which is a sense of atmosphere that even games like Fallout struggle to maintain. The only hint of organic life in the overworld are the roaming animals that can totally wreck your shit, and the overgrown plants with questionable geometry. There are no humans, and the underlying idea behind that is that there is no sentient life on Earth. Just hunks of metal clunking about, pretending as though they have free will. The emptiness is emoted through the grayscaling of the hub area, which transitions between many levels, each evoking a different theme presented through the complementary and contrasting colors. These levels range from loud and festive amusement parks using a lot of reds and blues, to expansive and quiet deserts with light browns and white, all of which used to be cities and city gatherings. There is no shortage of variety in the game, with each level and set piece being very memorable and effective, mostly. Does the presentation sometimes intrude on the gameplay? Yes. In fact, it's a constant issue of the game, switching back and forth between 3D and 2D just to show that it can. I don't mind it all that much since it's pretty pronounced when and where these instances occur, but the combat still operates on 3D rules, and it's very disorienting to engage with enemies who are fighting on a completely different plane of existence. This makes combat slow down to a crawl when enemies have the freedom to disappear into the foreground, and you're just left waiting for them to come back like they took your bike off for a spin. The camera is always completely out of your control in these sections, so you're at the mercy of whatever the plot demands you be focused on, and it's often during combat, so this ain't gonna earn any points when the game actively tries to distract you. Typical of a Yoko Taro game. Movement feels very fluid, which is a good thing disguised as a mildly annoying thing. While walking, running, jumping, and dashing are all good for combat and getting from point A to point B, it's not so much good for platforming, and there's a lot of that in this game. And I'm never 100% confident in any of the jumps that I've made in this entire thing. Of all the things you didn't have to copy from Bayonetta and Revengeance, the movement controls that made for great platforming in your game that's about 30 to 40% platforming had to be completely retooled into something that feels like I'm not actually controlling the character, but rather the kung fu wires that are supporting her. This is the complete opposite problem the previous dick-face game had. In that game, walking was walking, none of this anti-gravity bullshit. Here, it feels like the whole surface has been coated in butter while also wearing shoes that are also made of butter. Also, the combat isn't very challenging, and it's implemented in the most weird possible spots. Since the game has a loose corpse run system that's opt-in, you have to manually save rather than the game auto-saving for you. Experience isn't tied to leveling so much as it's tied to your most recent save. So, saving often is advised because something Dark Souls. And these save files, guys, these save files are going to be the bane of your existence. They will haunt your nightmares and hover over you while you sleep brandishing a knife. Believe me when I say you don't want to forget that you didn't save. Because fuck having an intuitive save system, we gotta beat Toriyoko up in this bitch. Listen, not to beat a dead horse for the third time in a row, but the reason why these mechanics work in Dark Souls was because the entire game was built around these systems. You just can't slap this shit into any type of system and expect it to work. This ain't flex tape. It's not a catch-all system. It requires refinement, trial and error, processes that clearly have been skipped in this instance. And it really feels like Square Enix is chasing a trend here. Also, some of the side missions are bugged, and Square hasn't released a patch to fix that, so... I'm fucked. I'm really fucked. And I just realized I'm this far into the review and I haven't said a word about the main story. It's there? It's human robots versus alien robots. It doesn't really get all that complex. Now, to be fair, the game does a very good job as presenting the story as something that's interesting. Like I said before, the characters that are presented keep me invested. The moment-to-moment gameplay and dialogue makes everything move along at a very brisk pace. And I don't know about anybody else, but I just love it when we have scenes of robots just talking to each other, hurling out constant streams of overly simplistic protocol speak. I can't get enough of that. The game does more than enough to make you feel like you should be invested in the story that's going on, and emotions are involved at some point. Like I said before, the side missions are where this game shines brightest because that's where you learn more about the lore of this world. And all the character development that takes place during the main mission, you'll get probably twice that during a single side mission. Humanity, emotions, life. What's it all mean? I don't know, stab this bitch.
Thank you, Dark Souls.
We have a pretty good sense of all of our characters being completely different people by the end of everything. 2B, 9S, and A2 aren't the same characters that they started off as. Hell, some of them might actually be worse off than they started. but every one of them goes through sufficient arcs and trials that forces change upon them. Or they just straight out reject the cards that they're dealt and they choose oblivion. And oh my god, that's Bloodborne. God damn it, game, I can't escape these memes, can't I?
And talked about by anyone.
The actions in this story are very much driven by emotions. No real clear sense of actions or understanding of the plot. A character feels that they should be doing X, so they do X. They'll figure out the Y later. The story is way more sad than it is dark this time around. I mean, there's plenty of dark elements in it for sure, but it's not like you're gonna feel empty inside after it's all over. This game is clearly more concerned about adding to the lore and mythos than it is telling a cohesive story. I mean, there are data files and weapons scattered everywhere, giving us vivid details about the world, and the characters are so lively and well acted on both fronts. I mean, the storytelling elements have to be pretty damn top-notch for me to find plain text conversations thrilling. Also, there are 27 endings, so you can't say that this game is trying to shortchange you on content. The impact of these endings, though, are subjective, and I don't see them satisfying all fans or newcomers. However, this is the first Drakengard game I can actually say is good. Not kind of interesting, not ambitious, good. In spite of the many imperfections, I feel confident in recommending it to anyone, not just fans of the series. This installment wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I did spend a good portion of this review saying that this game is jigsawing wheels off of other wagons, but it does have a lot of heart and polish. And you'd be amazed how often that fails to align in this series. Gameplay is fun and the story and characters are entertaining. The game's difficulty is less challenging and more tedium, but it wasn't a deal breaker for me. It has far better pacing compared to the last Dickface game, thanks in large to the open world setting, and it has a lot of replay value. And it's also a fresh of breath air to not only see a beloved series get back on its feet with a competing AAA title, but also see Platinum put out a quality product after almost half a decade of producing bargain bin garbage. Also, Scalebound probably wasn't going to be that good anyway. Devil May Cry, but with multiplayer co-op? Fuck off! Cancel that shit!